how can I get my file, like a JPEG file or a PNG or whatever, into my SQL Server database? I'm your host, Sean McKenzie. Thank you for joining once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our data engineering playlist, and we're going to take a look at how to put files into our SQL Server database and also how to get the file out and reopen it so that we have access to those, and that's very, very handy. Now, this is a topic that has been requested many times. Many thanks to viewers who have requested it over the past few years. Today, we're going to do it. Let's get to it. Need more resources for your team? Make sure to check out the additional links in the description. Okay guys, this is a fun one today. I've got my directory here, I've got a picture in there, and I want to put this picture file into my SQL Server database table, and we're going to do that today. So the first thing we're going to do is open our SQL Server Management Studio, and I'm using the master database here, and I'm going to create a new database, and it's going to be called PickDB, and I will put a go after that and we can run it, and we'll create our database. So there's our go. We can hit F5 or you can select it and click execute on the toolbar, and we are good to go. So you'll see that it completed command successfully, and so the next thing we'll do is we'll use our pictures database here, and we're going to create a table for our pictures, and it's going to be a two-column table. It's going to have an ID and a varbinary field in it, and the varbinary of course can store binary data, and so that is what a file is, and so we can put a file into that field. Great, so let's go ahead and do our create table statement. We'll create table pictures, and we'll just create picture ID as an incrementing integer there, so we'll call it picture ID int. It's not null, that's going to be our primary key, so it can't have nulls in it. We'll make it an identity that starts at 1 and increments by 1, and we'll just set that as our primary key. That's good enough for today. And then we'll create our picture data, which will be a varbinary field, and that is going to allow us to put some binary data in there, and nice and easy. There we go. We've got our table for pictures. There's our binary field, and that's going to help us a lot. There's our ID, so that's going to increment every time. And let's go ahead and select that and click execute on the toolbar. That's going to give us a table that we can use. So you can see your table. You might have to right click on your databases and refresh there in order to see your picture database, and there we go. There's our tables and our pictures table, and we can see we've got our picture ID and our picture data in there. The first one is a primary key, it's an integer. The second one is our binary field, and that is awesome. If I select top 1000 rows, of course there is no data there, but you can see what it looks like if we select it, and we'll be coming back to that after we put some data in. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is open our Visual Studio, and you'll see create a new project there, and that's exactly what we're going to choose. And on the next screen we are going to search for console. You can do that at the top and then choose console app.NET framework. You can probably do this using different apps as well, using ASP.NET or something, but we're going to do a simple console app today. After clicking create, you'll be on a screen where you can put in your project name, and you can choose whatever name you like here and your location, and you can choose the .NET framework that you'd like to use. We are using framework 4.8 today, which is one of the latest. I think 4.8.1 is the absolute latest, but 4.8 is just fine, and that's going to give us a console application that we can use here. Very simple, that we can do a sort of subroutine here in our main that will run and have some commands in it that we can demonstrate, where we can demonstrate putting a picture into our SQL Server database. And so just to test out our console here, we can do a console.writeLine, and then we'll do a console.read key so that our console will stop and it won't exit right away, and we can test that out and see what we get here. Perfect, and that's what we want to see, our starting comment there, and we can exit out of there, and that will get out of our execution. And now we can start writing our code. So the first things you might need in doing this is to do some import statements, and these are not necessary in this implementation, but they might be necessary if you are writing your own class or something like that. And so we're going to import system.data.sql client, and we're going to do system.io as well. And you'll see that it's gone gray there when I've done my import statement, and that's because those are already referenced in the console project, and we don't really need to import those, but you might need to for your project, so I'm just putting those in for redundancy, and we are good to go. So now we have our module, and I'm just going to drag this over here. So this is our directory. We've got a little file in there, our PNG file that says Sean McKenzie Data Engineering, stay real. And here we go. So there's our picture. We want to put this picture into a field in SQL Server, and we're going to do that today. So there's our picture. There's the PNG file, and we are going to stick that into a database field. And so here's the field we're going to put it into. There's the table in our pictures table that we just created. There's the field that it's going to go into, that binary field, and we can get started. So here we go. We're going to need some variables, and one of the variables, of course, will be the file that we're going to stick into our database, and we can put that into a string. We can call that our file string there, and we'll put in C. Now this is the directory that I'm using. Of course yours will be different, and probably in your solution you'll have some dynamic thing that gets the name from a table or from a like a selection from the user's computer with a path or something like that. But in this case we'll just hard code it, and I'm going to put in that VB load pick directory with smde.png. So there we go. That's our PNG file right there, and we can stick that into our string here. And then after that, what we're going to need is we will need a byte array, and that's going to hold the bytes from our file, our binary data that we have. So we'll call that one byte data, and then we're going to read all of the contents of our file. And in order to do that in our console app, all we have to do is go file.readAllBytes, and we'll put our file variable in there, and we are good to go for that. And then we're going to need our connection string, and that'll be the connection to our database. And so we're going to be using SQL client here, and so that has a little bit different of a connection string than the ODBC that we typically use on this channel, but we can put in our server name, which is Triton in this case, and the instance name is SQL 2019X, so that's a named instance of SQL Server, which is a SQL Server Express Edition database. And then we can include the name of our database and the fact that we're going to use trusted connections. So there's the server instance. Here is our database, and we've got our trusted connection set to true there. So we can move on to our next variable, and that will be our SQL variable. We're going to dim str_sql as string, and we'll go insert into pictures. That's the pictures table, and we'll insert into the picture data field. And what we want to do there is we'll extend that onto another line there just for readability, and we'll insert into pictures and then values, and then we're going to put a parameter in there, and we'll use the at picture data. We'll use that as our parameter name, and that will make it nice and easy for us to use a parameterized query. We're going to insert into pictures. There's our picture data field, which is in the database called picture data there that you can see. There's our field that we're going to insert into, and we're going to insert values, and there's our parameter with the @ sign on it, and that is what we want to see. So now we can go ahead and we can create our connection. And in order to create our connection today, we're going to use the using block, and that is going to dispose of everything when we're done. Lots of people like to use this as opposed to just dimming it as a variable and then disposing it at the end, so we'll use that one today. We're going to use our connection object as new SQL connection with our connection string as the argument, and then we're going to do another using block inside of that to create a new SQL command, which is nice and handy for us to be able to execute statements against our instance of SQL Server. And that one takes the SQL string and the connection object as arguments when we create that object. And so the using block is nice and tidy. It's going to dispose of everything at the end of our procedure here, or at the end of the block, and so that's really great. Okay, so inside the block we're going to add a parameter to our command object. We're going to add of course our picture data parameter. So we'll do command object dot parameters dot add, and then we'll give it the name, which is at picture data, and then we'll do a varbinary type, and then we'll use the value as well because we already have the data, because we read the data into a byte array there, and so we'll set the value equal to the byte array, and that completes the setup of our parameter with a value. There it is there. We've got our parameter, and we're going to add that to parameters. We're going to use the add method there, and we'll give it that name, picture data. We'll use the SQL DB type of varbinary, and we'll add the value at the same time, which is the byte array that we loaded earlier. And so that completes our parameter that we need in order to do our insert statement. And now we can go ahead and execute the statement that we need. But before that, we will open our connection, and we're going to open that connection to SQL Server, and then we can simply do a command dot execute non-query. That's just going to send the query to the database, and then we can close our connection. Now I am explicitly closing the connection here just for demonstration. You don't actually have to close the connection. The end of the using block will close the connection on its own since it calls dispose, but I'm just showing this for demonstration today. So there we go. So let's put in a little bit of feedback to the user. We can put in our console.writeLine, we'll say inserting, and just so that we have a little bit of feedback. If we get an error, we know how far we got to, and we can put some feedback at the end of our procedure here, you know, just to show that we've gotten to the end. So we could say picture inserted or something along those lines, and that's going to give us a little bit of feedback in our procedure here. So there we go. We can save our little console application, and that's pretty much all we need in order to try and put that smde.png in there. So let's hit start, and looks like it started. Oh, I got an error already. Check it out. So let's go. Oh, it can't find that picture because looks like the folder name is wrong. So that VB load pick, I think that's not right. So let's see here, VB, oh yeah, it's VB load pick underscore DB. So there you go. Don't get discouraged if you get errors like that. It's a natural part of programming, and it's going to be a great skill that you'll develop as you learn to troubleshoot those things. So there we go, VB load pick DB folder. Let's run that instead. So starting, inserting, picture inserted. It did not stop at the end. but we saw everything happen there in the blink of an eye, and we can go ahead and check our database and see what's inside. Let's right click on that table there, and we'll select top 1000 rows into a new tab there, and looks like we got our picture data. Check it out. It is meaningless to us in this format, but we got our ID was populated correctly and our picture data appears to be in there, and that looks like it worked great. But let's put a little bit more feedback and stop the script so that it stays open, so that we can see what actually happened there. So we could do press any key to exit, and then we could do a read key after that, and that'll stop the script in its tracks until you press a key. And let's insert that picture again. There we go, it ran off to the side there. Okay, so it started inserting, picture inserted, and then press any key to exit, and that looks like it ran through just fine. So I'll hit the enter key on that, and it disappears and stops running. And now if I put my cursor in here and rerun our query, you can see now we have 2 rows with the same picture file in there. We've got picture ID 1 and picture ID 2. And so that is fantastic. That's how you can insert a picture into our database. But what if we wanted to get a picture out of the database instead of putting it in there? Well, we can also do that using similar concepts. And so what we'll do here is, let's just comment out our SQL string, and we'll change that to a different string. We're going to use mostly the same construct here, where we're using the using blocks and the command and everything. And so we can go ahead and select picture data from pictures where ID equals 1 or something like that, where picture ID equals 1. And so that will allow us to select a single row. That's the main thing, is selecting a single row where we can get the data out of there into a file or something like that. And so we'll put picture ID equals 1. Your application, you'll probably put picture ID equals, at whatever picture you're looking up. But we can go ahead and we'll hard code that one in here just for demonstration. And that's what we want to see for our SQL string. And then we'll also we'll dim our output as a string, because we need somewhere for the file to go. Like we need to give it somewhere to go. So we'll say stick it in that same folder, pick db, and we'll call it output.png. So when you make your table, you might actually want to store the type of file with it in as another field, and maybe sizes and things, you might want to store those as other fields as well. So we'll comment out the parameters.add, because we're not using any parameters here, and we'll change our right line to selecting instead of inserting. And we're not going to use an execute non-query for this, because we are actually going to get some data out of this. And what kind of data are we going to get out of this? Well, we're going to get a byte array, just like we were using in the insert example. And so we could create ourselves another variable here. We'll call it byte pick, and we'll do that as a byte array, and we'll use a C type, and we'll put in our command there, and we're going to do command.execute scalar, and then we can put in our byte type in there, and that's going to give us exactly what we want. That's going to load that byte array, and that's going to get our data out and into our variable so that we can do something with it, like write it into the directory. And so now what we could do is we could say file.write all bytes, and we can put in our output name, so that'll be the path, and then we'll put in our byte array there, byte pick, and that'll write it to the directory. That all looks pretty good there. We can say picture inserted. Well, I guess we should probably change that. We'll change that to picture retrieved, and then we can save it. And I think at that point we could probably go ahead and run it, but let's pull up that directory so we can see the file getting created. So let's just grab this directory here, and I guess we can maybe move it to the side a little bit, and we can put our execution on top here. You should see another line get created in the background there. Let's go ahead and resize that and hit start, and let's see if we get anything out of that. So that's gonna start. It says picture retrieved, and it looks like the second line got created in the background called out. Oh, I misspelled it, output instead of output, but you get the idea. There is our picture, and we are good to go. We have retrieved our file from the database. You can do whatever you want with it at that point. That's how you can save files and retrieve them from SQL Server. Interested in more cool topics like these? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description.